I'm Mae Trumata from The Upcoming. So we're here today to talk about Inland.
Awesome. Thank you, May.
First of all, what drew you into the script and the story of Inland?
So Fridjof sent me a very early draft. And for me, there was just an immediate connection with this character who has a lot of sort of inarticulate problems and doesn't deal with the world in a sort of straightforward conformist way of dealing with things, i.e. like speaking about things, being able to find ways of expressing yourself that can help you deal with, big, heavy emotions. And I thought it was done in such a way that I hadn't really seen before. And the whole tone of the film, you can often see when you read a script that you can pick up on the vibe quite quickly, whether it's going to be kind of fast-paced and a bit light or a bit campy, or it's going to be heavy and somber. And with this, it felt like there was a through line through the whole thing that was very specific to a way of thinking and a way of writing that Fritz has that just, it was pretty encapsulating.
Cool. And this film is very hybrid of modern and folklore. Do you have any favorite English folktales when you were growing up?
So I was kind of brought up on the staples, which were less folklore and more kind of fairy tales, sort of Hansel and Gretel, that kind of stuff. But then later on, coming to the stories of Gawain and the Green Knight and Beowulf, those were the stories that really started to connect ancient folkloric Britain and with myself. Those are the ones that I started to think, okay, like you have these kind of great quests and figurative monsters that people are dealing with, and everything is an allegory, and yet everything is also something that you genuinely have to confront in a slightly different way to sort of children's stories, which feel slightly more narrative based. These are much more sort of thematic and tap into something that is probably a bit more universal and allegorical. So yes, things like Gawain and Beowulf in particular. And I think there are essences of both of those in this, of that kind of dark greenscape where you're on this kind of mythical quest, but that quest is both private and you're coming up against monsters that challenge you personally. So yeah.
Cool. And you mentioned Fritz a little bit earlier. I interviewed him just a few hours before you. He mentioned that you guys had like a pint and shared ideas back and forth on the script. Did any of yours make it into the final cut?
I'd like to think so. He'd probably say no. But it was, I mean, I know everyone says this, it was a collaborative process, but it was a collaborative process. But he's got his vision, and he's very clear on it, and it's very easy to buy into. But one of the nice things about the film was that at no point was it done. It wasn't like the script was finished and okay, or this scene goes like this, so cool, let's do the scene. We were constantly working through it and coming up with ideas and sharing stuff together. And he's just such an impressive director, because he does give you that space as an actor to go, okay, well, what happens if we try this? And it's not a disrespect to the script. We weren't ripping it up and trying something completely different, but there was just room to go, yeah, do that. Or Fritz would just say a little bit more of that, a little bit less of that, and it would change. So yeah, I mean, there's not like a definitive moment that I would say, we made that one up in the pub. It just sort of organically grew.
Okay, and what is he like as a director? And was it hard balancing being his friend and working under him?
Interesting use of the phrase "working under him."
Sorry.
No, which I guess in many ways you are. Like, obviously, I defer to Fritz in many ways. We didn't know each other before the film, so we'd started talking about the script about 6 months to 9 months before the film. So we knew each other in a professional capacity, I guess, but lots of that stuff had been very tied to the film, but we were meeting up in social situations. And I think we just really understood each other. There was very much a sense that, you know, my character takes up a lot of the space in the film, and Fritz is in charge of the whole ship. So we knew that we had to be on a similar wavelength if we were going to articulate what we were trying to, particularly with a script that doesn't give you as many anchors as maybe like a more straightforward drama would give you. You go, well, you know, you want this, and so you say that, and they say that, and there you go, there's the scene. But like I say, he leaves a lot of room, and is a very, very soft manner where, like I say, you can just, someone would say, you know, we would do a scene and then he would just go, okay, more of that, you know, turn that up. And so he was never didactic. And he allowed us time. You know, there were scenes that probably in his head, you know, the first AD was probably thinking, okay, this is going to take an hour, and it would take 4, because we had the time and the space to go, okay, well, what happens if this, and what if this, and if that, because everything changes all the time. You know, if you're softer at the beginning, the arc of a scene will be different. Or, you know, we would finish some scenes laughing, and then we'd do it again, and it would finish in this sort of long, somber silence. And he allowed the direction of the scenes to be guided by us, but all sort of under his overarching thing. But we still made time for going for pints and having a nice time as well. So it was never a conflict of interests or a sort of social versus professional thing.
Cool. And he also mentioned earlier that he had a teacher who inspired the Mark Rylance character. Do you have that same kind of like mentor / father figure in your life that you kind of drew inspiration from?
Yeah, in a way. So I have, my parents are divorced and they're both remarried. So the idea of, and I had a lot of teachers growing up who became very important. And yeah, I think particularly when you're a young, and I hesitate to use the phrase, artist, you're always kind of looking to the people who are doing things that you would like to be doing, and taking stuff from them, whether that's writers, actors, directors, poets, etc. So there's a whole wealth of people that, particularly at different times, you know, for a year, you might be on a complete Bob Dylan craze, and you think, okay, you're really tapping into something, and then, you know, going into a literature side and looking at, say, the Beat Generation, and looking at what these young men are trying to do and trying to say, and then in an acting world, I trained in Bristol, and so figures like Daniel Day-Lewis are, you know, just the pinnacle for me. And you know, as an actor, Mark is someone that I've just always, you know, highly cherished, and have got to everything that he's been in, and has really been in the upper echelons for me. So it was just a gift of an experience to be able to kind of combine like creative idols alongside, yeah, the male role models in life that you can sort of piece together. But it's hard. There's not one person, because he is his own character, and his relationship to the boy is its own thing. And I think there is a fine line between drawing too much on a personal experience that corrupts what would be which is a fictional relationship, and trying to draw too many parallels of like, oh, that's like me and my stepdad, or me and my dad. You know, it becomes, I don't know if that's totally honest to the relationship you're trying to portray, but there are definitely bits that are useful to take.
Cool. And for Inland, how has that helped you develop as an actor yourself, like the overall experience with this film?
Well, it was one of my first jobs, so for me, being a lead for a long shoot was a huge learning curve, because it's about managing energy and people, and dealing with in a way a pressure, and in a way working out how other people can help you, and how you can help other people. And there are things that you learn on a film set that you can't possibly learn in theory, of like how to be and how not to be in people's way, or when's a good time to pipe up and be involved, or when you need a mood to change, so that everyone, if there's a day where it feels like things are getting hard, like what can you do as an actor to go like, okay, and as a person to go, okay, well, how can we change this? And Mark is a wonderful person to learn from, because he's so inclusive and warm, and he obviously makes phenomenal work. But it was very, very useful watching me see a leading man like that, and his manner and the way that he dealt with people, and I definitely tried to take that onwards. And in terms of my process, which I think UK actors use, having the time to think, okay, well, how do I get to the level that I want to be at, and how do I sustain that? And that's a learning curve. And it gives you a level of confidence that you can take into your next job and kind of think, okay, well, you kind of pick up as you go along, as Stoppard says, and you let some things go and you pick new things up. And it was a bit of a supermarket dash, because I was just constantly throwing things away and picking new things up. So yeah, kind of immeasurable experience, really.
Cool. And sometimes we forget how beautiful the rural landscape of like the country is, and films like Inland give us a peek into like the magical sites that you can find in England. What are some of your favorite places to visit in England?
In England, well, I mean, I would put Gloucestershire up there now. I'd spent some time in and around that area and had lived down in the southwest. I spent some time up in Derbyshire last year, which is just utterly beautiful. My mum lives on the south coast, so all along the South Downs Way. And it's, I completely agree. You do forget, and particularly, in sort of COVID era, where the idea of going abroad, it gets harder, and Brexit and all that kind of stuff. You kind of look inwards and go, well, we have so much here, and we are the green and pleasant land. And Wales and Northern Scotland. I mean, there are just so many beautiful parts, and I think it's a real testament that, although the film is partly about the city and the people who work in the less sort of pastoral sides of the city, it also, the correlation between the two of how the city and the landscape and nature coexist, I think is a very important thing to try and hold on to, because there's a very lovely short story by a man called William Sansom, who was a firefighter in World War II. And the story goes that a girl, her father disappears, and she says, I think it's because he couldn't find a place where he could go and sing out loud when no one would hear him. And that's very hard to do in a city. You can't go and sing at the top of your voice and have no one hear you. And I often look for places like that, not necessarily to sing at the top of my voice, but as an example of space and being on your own in a place of nature. So, and there are lots of those, thankfully.
Cool. And being in the London Film Festival, I don't know if you've heard about what happened with like the Film House in Edinburgh and Film Festival in Edinburgh. How important do you think it is to support the arts?
And endlessly so. I mean, we've gone through a very, very long period of the arts being stupendously underfunded and unappreciated. And it was interesting during COVID, everyone sort of turning on their TVs and going, oh, maybe maybe this is quite important. It's not just something to do at the end of the day. Maybe like, there are important stories. And of course they are. Like our whole world culture is based on art. Like, if you strip back, without art, there'd be no advertising. And I'm not trying to say that the two have to coexist, but like we are absolutely fundamental to articulating human emotions and experiences. And the film festival, it's so sad about Edinburgh, but it's also great on the other hand to see London really burgeoning and pushing forward and supporting, from Matilda through to gorgeous small budget foreign movies. So it's great to see all of that celebrated, definitely. And I think, you know, we're quite a proud nation of artists, and there's a possibility that that gets lost in the mire of big studios and pressures from streamers and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not dissing those things particularly, but there needs to be space for films like this, that people can come together and really make something that means something to them and hopefully to other people, without, you know, huge conglomerate overarching, and yeah, with some artistic freedom, because it's a right to expression.
Cool. And just to bring the mood up a little bit about like film festivals, what was it like to finally open the film at the London Film Festival?
Well, it happens tonight, so we're 3 hours away. So I
Are you
can't tell.
nervous?
Yeah, of course I am. I haven't quite decided if I'm going to watch it or not, just because I don't want to watch it through the eyes of everyone else, and I'm going to feel sorry for the person who's sitting next to me as I fidget my way through and blush and put my head between my knees. But it's great. It's been great to be part of the festival and have seen so much wonderful stuff, and it's just fantastic getting people talking about film. You know, walking along the South Bank and everyone is coming out of something, going into something, and it's a dialogue, and everyone's kind of. So it's just, yeah, it's fantastic to be part of, and it'll be, yeah, good to have our very small but very enjoyable slice of it coming up in the next couple of days.
Cool. And circling back to Inland, what are you most excited for the audience to see?
I get my butt out at the end, so you know, maybe that's enjoyable. Maybe that's when everyone will leave.
No butt double.
No butt double. Sadly, no. The budget is, they got a very handsome man in, and I said no, because you're gonna show me up, so I'm gonna have to use my own. I think, I mean, this has been a very, very special project to me, and everything I've worked on since has not been in the shadow, because they've all been very different, but it's been the thing that I've definitely been proudest of. So I'm just looking forward to it having the life that it deserves after 2 years of process with it. And Mark he's stunning in it. He really, really is. But actually, it's really not. The nice thing about film is that you might come away and say that person did a good performance, but the whole team, the lighting and the music, and actually the edit, because it's taken on so many forms. So for all of those things finally to come together it's magic. It's really
cool.
nice.
And last question, but what message do you hope the audience will take away when they walk out of that cinema tonight?
That is a good question. It's not really for me to say, but on the one hand, that you can make films like this, and you can, like, they have a place, and they should be respected, and then from the actual film point of view, I hope that it goes some way to telling the story of people who can't express what they need to express, and the routes that you can go down in order to express that, whether that's emotional inarticulacy, or disappearing off into nature, or allowing certain strands of your consciousness to become dominant. I think we live in a pretty straightforward way in a not particularly straightforward world, and for people to be able to engage with a relationship that doesn't have any easy answers and doesn't actually give us any answers, and to come away and think, okay, well, maybe I have a relationship that's similar to this, and what am I going to do about that?
Thank you so much, Rory, for your time. Hope you have fun tonight.
Thank you.